Dave Ehrenberg is back with me, and we're joined by Emily Brooks, Capitol Hill correspondent for The Hill, Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden, and Maura Gillespie, founder of BlueStack Strategies and previous advisor to former House Speaker John Boehner. Welcome, all of you. So, Dave, the survivor stories are heartbreaking. Why did they not gain traction before? Why were these women repeatedly dismissed by authorities?
That's what they want to know. They've been ignored, apparently, by state and federal prosecutors to some extent, and by politicians who claim that they have their backs. And so they want to know, why are we being silenced? Why are you not hearing us? And I think when President Trump called them a hoax, they had had enough. That was the final straw, and that led to the press conference. And one reason why you haven't heard a lot from them recently is that Virginia Giuffre, who was the survivor who spoke out the most, she committed suicide recently, and that left a conspicuous void since then. And now, from that press conference, you see that new survivor voices are speaking up, and that's bad news for President Trump, because it means that this controversy is not going away. I mean, you even had Marjorie Taylor Greene at that press conference, who's one of the most loyal Trump supporters, and so it had to be extra annoying for the president, and it shows until they release the files, this thing's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and also Virginia Giuffre posthumously has a book coming out, released, I think, October, November, chronicling her story. Meantime, Emily, look, these stories are so moving. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace emerged from a survivors meeting in tears. Then you had Congresswomen Boebert and Green joining the cause. What impact did survivors have on both Republicans and Democrats?
Yeah, I think that from what they said, that was a bipartisan meeting from House Oversight Committee of Republicans and Democrats, closed door for over 2 hours. Speaker Johnson, and sort of a show of Republicans doing something on this issue, was in that meeting for that entire meeting. And everybody who left said it was very emotional. There were tears. And I think that it reinvigorated for some, the importance of wanting to get to the bottom of some of this. And I think for, a lot of the Republicans who are looking into this, showed them maybe how deep things go. There has been a lot of material from the Epstein case and the Maxwell case that has shown, the extent to what they did. But a lot of what the survivors are looking for are the people who were surrounding this operation, who knew things that didn't speak up. And getting to the bottom of that is going to probably take a bit more digging than I think some Republicans were expecting.
And Megan, Trump in his social media rant says the Democrats don't really care about survivors, adding they're leaning on the Epstein case for political gain. But survivors emphasize the bipartisan nature of this scandal. What are the political risks as the push to release names is gaining momentum?
Well, if Democrats were leaning on this, they would have released the files during the Biden administration, but they, have respect for due process and the rule of law, because Ghislaine Maxwell was going through an appeal. So they did not do that when they knew that Trump's name was in these files already. But I don't think that there's a lot of political risk here. I think these campaign ads against these Republicans are actually writing themselves. They're protecting pedophiles. They're protecting child traffickers. I mean, these women were abused, and now there's faces to this massive allegation, and there's nothing more humanizing than seeing these women give this press conference.
And Maura, I want to play what one survivor says was Epstein's top brag. Let's watch.
His biggest brag forever was that he was very good friends with Donald Trump. He had an 8x10 framed picture of him on his desk with the two of them. They were very close.
So the White House has said that Trump broke off his friendship with Epstein, kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago for, quote, being a creep. Is this former friendship influencing Trump's decisions on releasing the files?
I think it's certainly getting under his skin. I mean, we've seen the emotional reaction from the president from the start of this, where he was defiant, shifting blame, and now to call it a hoax is just belittling to those women who were brave enough to step forward and put themselves out there and tell their stories. And I actually think with the press conference, one of the most aside from the stories from the survivors themselves, was when Marjorie Taylor Greene explained why they hadn't come forward before, why they hadn't released names before, because of the threats that they were under and the amount of legal fees they'd be, swallowed by from these people who were on these lists or who are friends of Jeffrey Epstein's, who, would dominate them in the courts. And so this is where they are saying enough is enough. Marjorie Taylor Greene and others have said they'll read the names themselves and face those repercussions because they want that transparency. Because again, for Republicans who ran on accountability, transparency, this flies in the face of it. And I do think that Donald Trump knows that. And so shifting blame and calling it a hoax is the tool he uses most often. But I don't see it working this time.
So, Dave, what is the significance of House oversight staffers getting access to the unredacted documents this next week? I mean, what might they see, and how can that information be helpful to their investigation?
Well, it depends on how many documents they get access to, because the Department of Justice has given the committee some, but not all the documents. And so of the documents they're going to see, I think it'll be important about the birthday card that Trump says is a hoax. Well, they'll get to see if it's in the file and if it's real or not. But the thing that everyone wants to know are the names of unindicted co-conspirators. I'm not sure if the staffers are going to get access to that. And that's the crux here of this issue, because the MAGA base has been told they will get a client list of Epstein. The client list does not exist, but the files exist, and the names of unindicted co-conspirators are in the files. So until that's released, this controversy is not going away. And so it is important if they get the names of those co-conspirators inside the House committee. But then the question is, will they make those names public? I don't think they will, as long as President Trump is in the White House.
But, Dave, could any of those co-conspirators, people's names, could these people be indicted now?
I think it's very unlikely. There's statute of limitations issues. There's witness memory issues. I think it's unlikely also because the Department of Justice, when the number 2 person, Todd Blanche, interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell, they didn't do that as a way to get information on unindicted co-conspirators. That was a way to exonerate President Trump, and that's why they released the transcript immediately. If you were going to pursue charges against new individuals, you're not releasing the transcript of the key witness in the case to give everyone a heads up. So that tells me that this is not about pursuing new charges. And plus, one more thing, Epstein signed a non-prosecution agreement that gave everyone immunity, even co-conspirators who are not named. So it's going to be really hard to indict anyone else over this.
Let me pose this to you, Emily, trying to get the details of what you know reporting-wise. What are we expecting to happen in the coming week? Do we know how much oversight committee members will get to see, and might they get to see any names of Epstein clients that may not previously have been made public?
Well, the big thing will be this Monday deadline for a subpoena of the Epstein estate. That's where this birthday book that Trump wrote a letter to Epstein that's going to be part of it, expected to be part of it. That was something that the victims' attorneys were pointing to in that press conference, saying that that is where there's going to be a lot more new information, that maybe people could follow leads there that are not in the Department of Justice files that are going to or might be released to the committee or elsewhere. So those are the big things. There also is going to be a very big interview later this month with Alex Acosta, former labor secretary under the first Trump administration, who resigned in the wake of Epstein being arrested in 2019, because he was the prosecutor who originally gave Epstein what was thought of as a sweetheart 2008 deal. So that is going to be a very long and very interesting. Chairman Comer has said he promises to release a transcript of that eventually, deposition, or it's a voluntary interview with him.